morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. It's quite good to be here, standing here again after I think it's been more than 5 years since we've been having the whole COVID situation, and it's nice to be here with all of you again. The topic of my talk this morning is when less is more, the time for simplicity. When I reflect over the almost 87 years of my life, I'm struck by how dramatically things have changed in my lifetime, how complicated things have become, especially in terms of technology. When I was a high school student in Los Angeles in the 1950s, the world seemed a lot less complicated. I lived in a small house in a working class neighborhood. There were essentially three ways one could communicate with other people in those days: either seeing them in person, making a phone call on the one landline in the home, or mailing a letter with a 3-cent stamp on it. When I wanted to see friends, essentially I either walked to their house, my friends, got on my bike or got in my 1948 Pontiac, knocked on their door. Most of our communication was face-to-face. Sometimes we had long conversations on the phone, but at least it was voice-to-voice, which was so different from the texting that predominates today. For entertainment, we played ball in the park, or we went to the local thrifty drugstore for milkshakes and hot fudge sundaes. In the evening, we listened to the radio or watched TV on a 12-inch black and white screen with access to all of 7 channels. Daytime TV was almost non-existent. Nighttime TV ended at midnight because that's when they turned off all the stations. We listened a lot to music, but only at home on small record players on 45 RPM records. You couldn't listen to music when you were walking down the street because there was no technology to allow that. And I kind of like that. The day when you see these sort of zombie-like people walking, totally caught up in what they're listening to as they're walking down the street. On weekends, we often went to movies at one of the 3 theaters within walking distance: the Alto, Fifth Avenue, or the Academy. And there we would see always a double feature, a newsreel, and a cartoon. And if it was on Saturday, you also had a serial. And no one printed schedules of movies in those days, so you just simply went to the movie when you felt like it. Often you got there in the middle of the film. You just wait till it all came around again until it got to the spot where you'd come in and then you'd leave, which seems kind of like a strange way to do it now. And I don't know why we didn't pay attention to when the movie started, but we somehow didn't care. But what a contrast to what life is like today, right? Today, it's hard even to imagine a world without cell phones, computers, cable TV, the internet. And think about this for a minute. Imagine that you're living 70 years ago. It's hard to believe, 70 years ago. And when you are late for an appointment or a date because of a delay, an accident, traffic, or something else, the only way you can let that person you're going to meet know is by finding a payphone and calling them. And if there's no phone around, or you are driving somewhere and can't pull over to use a phone, you're just going to be late and they're not going to know it. And you're going to just have to say, okay, I'm going to be late. Too bad. Not that we always took it that easily, but that was the way it was. And we kind of felt that was the natural way of things. Today, of course, you can always pick up your cell phone and call and say, hey, I'm going to be late. I don't want to romanticize the simplicity of life 70 years ago. It wasn't a perfect world by any means. One's private world then was much smaller than it is today. And the larger world seemed a lot larger because there was no Wi-Fi communication. In medical emergencies, people were much more likely to die because there were no telephones to call for help. Term papers and dissertations had to be typed on manual typewriters with no delete and pause or paste possibilities. That's the way I did my doctoral dissertation. And the news spread much more slowly because it could only be communicated by landline, telegraph, or TV. And in that respect, I think we've made a lot of progress since. But when I think of the trade-offs, I sometimes wonder, are we really better off today than we were then? And I think we are, probably, but I'm not sure. As early as 1970, it became apparent that the world was changing rapidly and technological changes were occurring by leaps and bounds. And in that year, Alvin Toffler wrote a book called Future Shock, in which he warned how the technological changes that were rapidly occurring were, while making things a lot more convenient, were going to cause a lot of confusion and a lot of anxiety. And I think he was absolutely right. A good example, which quickly became apparent, is how something as simple as shopping at the drugstore or supermarket changed. In 1950, there were two kinds of toothpaste, Pepsodent and Colgate. Today, there are hundreds. Breakfast cereal was either cornflakes, Wheaties, or puffed rice. Those were your choices. When going to movies, there were usually only 2 or 3 films to choose from. And watching TV, there were only 7 channels. Today on Spectrum, I have access to 450 channels. What Toffler pointed out, and I think correctly, was that having too much to choose from can be too much of a good thing. And it puts stress on the brain. TMI, too much information, too many things to choose from. Think of how many ways we experience that today. I can give a reluctant, embarrassing personal example. When I want to decide how to spend my time after work and on weekends, I have access to 9 different streaming services, always have a list of at least 10 good series that I want to watch, most of which I won't see because there just isn't time to do so. Meanwhile, I have more than 20 books downloaded on my Kindle that I haven't read yet. And in a couple of weeks, this is going to become much more complicated by the fact that on my MLB TV subscription, I will have access to all Major League Baseball games, including all 162 games of my beloved LA Dodgers. And with all these possibilities, it takes real effort to have the willpower and discipline to take the necessary time for meditation, for reflection, or even for playing my lovely piano, on which I don't practice nearly enough. And forget about checking on new posts on Facebook and Instagram with any consistency. It's really a case of too much of a good thing. It takes a lot of discipline to sort these things out and make mindful choices. And I think this is a big problem for many people today. And I really worry sometimes of what the effect of this is on children, on teenagers, whose primary and sometimes only mode of communication is texting, who may be losing the ability to know how to really interact face-to-face with other human beings. I see this kind of problem a lot in my therapy clients, especially during these difficult political times, when it's not just a matter of feeling overwhelmed by technology, but at the same time, it seems like the whole world is off balance and that we really wonder what kind of a world it is becoming. And I wrote this just 2 weeks ago, and believe me, I think it's worse today than it was 2 weeks ago, getting worse every day. In such a time, all those normal everyday things which would drive us a bit crazy in normal times can now at least feel a bit like a distraction from the craziness to which we're exposed every time, every time we turn on the news. In the current political climate, who can we trust? Can we trust what we see on the news? Are we better off watching MSNBC, CNN, PBS, or God forbid, Fox News? How much do the corporations that economically run this country shape the news and brainwash us in ways that we're not even aware of? I often advise my clients, don't watch the news more than a few minutes a day. Get the headlines, but don't spend much time on the narrative, because most of those are geared to trying to keep us tuned in by frightening us. When people are frightened, they pay attention. And of course, that's exactly what the corporate sponsors want. Our brains are being manipulated in so many ways. Do you realize how much, you probably do, but how much Google, X, and all social media platforms really know about you? I mean, really know your likes, your dislikes, your tendencies, etc. And with the emergence of AI, which is growing by leaps and bounds, their ability to alter our ways of thinking are growing exponentially. Now, having said all that, I don't really want to paint a totally bleak picture. The irony here is that the very things that can destroy us also have the potential to make our lives healthier and safer. And here, I think, is where the question of simplicity or less is more comes into play. Technology, if used responsibly, can save lives. We were told that computers using advanced AI have the potential to cure cancer much more quickly than we could imagine, and that hopefully will happen. Advanced technology is a blessing as well as a curse. I mean, look at how we are here meeting today, online and in person. Even as recently as 20 years ago, we would not have been able to share this Dharma service with anyone who couldn't physically be present at the temple. Now we can share it with anyone, anywhere in the world. And that's good. That's wonderful. Social media can be a great place to keep in touch with what's going on in the lives of friends and family. Cell phones, when used responsibly, can be a godsend. It seems like such a wonderful miracle to me that at a moment's notice, I can have a FaceTime chat with my granddaughters, one of whom lives in Pittsburgh and the other is away at college in Plattsburgh, New York. These are good things. It all comes down to knowing how to use these wonderful technological advances mindfully so that we're in charge of them and they're not running our lives. It sounds so simple, yet it's so difficult. And believe me, I personally struggle with that every day. Think of your life, if you would, being like a car on a highway. Do you want to be in the driver's seat, mindfully taking the car where it needs to go? Or do you want to be stuck nervously in the back seat while the car careens in any which direction as it's being driven by sources outside of your control, which is what I think we often feel, many of us today. And here is where the need to simplify our lives, I think, becomes so important. The challenge which we all face and which becomes more difficult with each year, each month, each day, is how to make things more manageable through simplification. How not to be overwhelmed by political and social events on the one hand, and by the immense stimulation that we're exposed to every day through modern technology and all those little gadgets that we feel like we couldn't live without. The question I think about often, and sometimes I pose it to some of my clients, is this. Imagine spending just 1 month living alone on an island somewhere, maybe one of those small islands off the coast of Maine. You're alone. You have a cabin, a bed, food, exposure to nature, but you have no phone, no computer, no TV or radio, not even reading or writing material, like Robinson Crusoe. Who are you in that place under those circumstances? What would that month be like for you? Now, that thought I find can be both frightening and comforting. We tend to define ourselves by our titles and by our belongings. When it's just me, alone on that island, without my belongings, with no one calling me Dr. Jones, Dad, husband, or simply Kim, who am I? I think that's a great meditation koan. I think our spiritual practice is such an important part of achieving even a partial sense of embracing that kind of simplicity. When we're meditating, hopefully, we learn to be able to let go of all that stimulation, of all those things that want to take our minds in different directions. Is it a wonder that there is so much ADD and ADHD in the Western world today? This is where Buddhist spiritual practice, I think, is so important. When it's just me, my breath, and my empty mind, even for just short periods of time, those other things become less important. Of course, we can't spend all of our time in meditation, obviously. We live in a dualistic world, and it is in that world that we spend most of our lives. But hopefully, I think what we do gain from meditation, reflection, journaling, is greater will and strength to not be driven by the external stimuli that can overwhelm us and even define us. And being part of a Sangha like this Sangha is very helpful because we can share these struggles together. As we try to live our lives as responsibly as possible during these dark times, and these are dark times, I think one of the ways we can mindfully simplify things is by focusing as much as possible on our immediate lives, on the micro rather than the macro, trying as we can to be instruments of love, compassion with our family, our friends, our immediate colleagues, doing the best we can in that small part of the world that we occupy. And of course, this does not mean that we should be oblivious to the terrible things going on in the world. We can't. You'd have to be deaf and blind not to be aware of just how bad it is right now. Because of that, I think that most of us correctly feel we want to have a voice in what is happening, not feel totally helpless with what's going on in the world. And I do think that we are called to make our voices heard, to let those in positions of power know that what they're doing is wrong and that we're going to protest until things get better. Now, this may sound like a mixed message, a call to simplicity and a call to action. The thing is, and this is what I've learned from Won Buddhism, is that when I think we are mindful and calm in our daily lives, then we are more able to make our voices heard peacefully and calmly in the larger world. And you know, we can get very discouraged when we think about this, either the personal sphere or the larger sphere. It's very normal to feel, how can I, one of 8 billion people on a planet that is one of billions of planets in a universe that stretches over 13 billion light years, how can I do anything that's going to make a difference anywhere? There's a Zen saying, when a leaf falls in Tokyo, the earth trembles in Beijing. As Buddhists, we believe that energetically everyone and everything in this world is interconnected. And we can't begin to envision or know just how or to what extent our thoughts and actions reverberate like ripples through a stream, sending positive or negative karma into the world. If we do believe in this interconnectedness, and believe me, I do, it means something for us to concentrate on trying to live as best we can in the midst of the craziness, with love, compassion, empathy with the people we see every day in our lives, while at the same time being involved in peaceful political action. And not least of all, having good self-care. And this can make a difference. I think this is illustrated beautifully in the Taoist story about the rainmaker. In a Chinese village, there had been no rain for several months. The villagers were afraid that the crops would die and they would starve to death. The elders convened and decided that they would call upon a rainmaker who lived in a village on the other side of the mountain that overshadowed their village. So they sent a messenger to seek his help. He gladly came and spent a few days getting to know the people of the village. He then asked if they would bring him supplies so he could build a small hut. So he built his hut, closed himself in the hut for 3 days and 3 nights. At the end of the 3 days, he emerged, and the elders were now anxiously awaiting to see what he would do to help bring the rain. But to their dismay and disappointment, he simply dismantled the hut, mounted his horse, bid them farewell, and rode off into the sunset. The next day, the heavens opened and the rains came and nourished the plants that had almost died, saving the crop and the village. The villagers were amazed. How could he possibly have done this? They sent the messenger to ask him, "What did you do? How did you bring the rain?" He replied, "I did not bring the rain, but when I saw the people in your village, I saw that they were not centered, not at one with the universe. They were not in Tao. So I spent 3 days and nights putting my own spirit in Tao." Thank you for letting me share these thoughts with you.